Hello and welcome to the penultimate episode of Arches. That's right, the story is about to almost be over. um, so yeah, be prepared. A lot of stuff is gonna happen in this episode, so I say episode, but it's video, but yeah, you know what I mean. Uh, be prepared to possibly hear me cry, or at least sniffle a lot, or have trouble getting through some lines. Like even right now, I've been holding off reading this because it's like, oh no, oh god, no. Uh, but I have to do this for Cameron and for Devon and Artie. Well, okay, so last we saw, Brian was choking out Cameron because Brian basically realized that it's over. He kidnapped the wrong people, so to speak. If he kills Brian, Cameron, or Artie, people will come looking and it's over for him. They're gonna find all the bodies, they're gonna find him, he's gonna get arrested or he's gonna be killed or something. And I guess you could say he reached the point where it's like, you know what? Frick it. I'm gonna, kill all of these people and just whatever, frick the consequences. So yeah. Well, there really isn't much to say. Artie was dragging what's left of his body to try to find help, to the highway, and who knows if he made it. Flynn appeared. Well, the socket-faced monster / Flynn appeared. And he usually only appears during bad moments. And the static monster also appeared to watch basically Cameron, die. So yeah. Well, let's just continue and see. Pain pounds rhythmically in their head like a heavy drumbeat, making their ears pin back tightly before they begin to whine. Then they croak as their sore throat protests against making the sound. They stare at the scene before them, then they blink. But it doesn't help them make better sense of what is in front of them. In fact, it seems to make it worse. Who's making sense of what is in front of who? These intrusive thoughts about not existing. Who's having these thoughts? See, you're coming round. Fear rises up in his throat, something deep in his brain telling him to flee that voice, to escape from it. But he's still too confused to figure out who or what he even is right now, because he still feels like nothing. But he's also still conscious enough to know that he is, in fact, something. He remembers that he's someone named Cameron. He remembers the situation, and he remembers that he's been drugged with shrooms and Xanax. His trip has reached its dizzying peak, his sense of self so utterly decimated that he isn't sure how he's ever going to feel the same again. The terror and torture of the past 2 days has culminated to this, the moment that his mind gives in and breaks, and Cameron can't tell what's real and what isn't anymore. You realize nothing's real. But there's something else too. Despite the terrible loss of who he was, Cameron, this amalgamation he calls Cameron, is sensing things even more vividly than he had just a few minutes ago when he'd contacted Dev. Cameron sees what's ahead of him, but he's seeing so much more. In his mind's eye, he looks forward, and he sees a myriad of people in front of him, though they're all the same people, Devon and Brian and himself, locked in a vicious, spinning blur of claws, teeth, and blood, and horrific, unidentifiable viscera. It's confusing, seeing so many versions of himself and his boyfriend, and he turns his head to glance away, not wanting to see that violence. Then, noticing something over his shoulder, he looks back, and this time he sees one version of himself along with Brian. He sees his unconscious body being pinned against a tree for a while longer before he crumbles to the ground. What the hell? His voice is low, husky, and barely audible. Brian laughs, startling the coyote out of his vision of violence. I choked you the fuck out, that's what! Cameron blinks at the bear, then back at the forest. I thought I died. Heh, not yet, kid. We got a few things to do first, and you probably want to see your boyfriend too, eh? Not sure you'll be able to get to talk to him since he's knocked out. Knocked out? Yep. Wait, with what? Relax, it's just Rohypnol. Sure, I gave him a good amount, but they're a few decades old because they made them illegal in the States back in the 90s, and you know, when pills get old, they don't work so good anymore. Brian goes on and on about Rohypnol and how it's used to be the premier date rape drug in the country. Cameron watches the bear's mouth move in waves and ripples, yellow teeth poking out from behind his lips as saliva collects and becomes frothy at the corners. Who's watching this? Cameron reassures himself automatically. I'm watching this, and I need to save Devon. He's not so convinced by the first part, though. Me, Cameron. Simple concepts that aren't so simple anymore. Just like in high school, he stopped existing. It's different this time, though. The Xanax is certainly squashing the panic that he should be feeling right now, but this time, his perspective is from a completely different angle. Cameron's amalgamation does still exist, but the borders have dissolved, and he seems to be seeping into everything. Despite already knowing he's insignificant, he's still awestruck by how small Cameron is compared to the world. Even the bugs crawling beneath the leaves make Cameron feel small, an entire world he knows nothing about. But entangling his identity with the universe means that he's also entangled with Brian. The bear is missing parts of himself, kinda like Artie, shattered pieces and jagged holes, pot-marking the landscape of his life. Cameron almost feels sorry for him, that maybe if things had been just a little different, the odds just a little more in Brian's favor, he could have been a very different person. What's really disturbing, though, is the genuine affection that he has for Cameron, his urge to caress and hold the coyote, but there's a hatred there too, a disgust for what Cameron is. Young, attractive, and a fag. Not just queer like Brian considers himself to be, but a faggot. The kind of queer that acts real cute before fucking over the real men who should be doing all the fucking. So it feels good to punish Cameron, but it's even better to watch him suffer, to watch the way his body writhes, his mouth opens for air, his eyes wide and fearful. Cameron feels himself recoil from understanding Brian's thought process, a way of thinking that he'd never consider himself. But that thought process isn't what makes Brian the terrible person that he is. Cameron knows that most don't have a say in how their sexual interests and fetishes develop, so the thoughts themselves aren't exactly evil, at least not to Cameron. Cameron knew a few guys from college who had interests similar to Brian. During his first year of dating Devon, the bear had timidly asked him if he could gently close his teeth over the coyote's neck and growl. It was thrilling and intense, and Cameron loved the rush. But then Devon had a nightmare about tearing out Cameron's throat, and that was the end of that. So to Cameron, Brian isn't all that strange. What makes Brian different isn't that he has fetishes. He's not crazy. He's not a psychopath. No, the true root of Brian's evil is clear. He's selfish, and he's never satisfied with what he gets. Selfish enough to put dozens of young people through hellish torture until they finally died. All while having the capacity to fully control himself. all while having full access to alternatives like roleplay. But it's not enough. He always needs more. All for his own fleeting drug-fueled sexual gratification because at one point, Brian decided that's what makes him feel good. So fuck this world that makes him feel bad. But he'd found some release in strangling Cameron, and now his focus is turning back to a vague idea of how to use Cameron's abilities. Something to stop him from spending the rest of eternity with his victims torturing him. Cameron could spoil the end for Brian, let him know that when everyone dies, they just cease to be what they were. That's it. Ghosts, demons, and poltergeists. Creations of the living, and whatever it is that's in Echo. Cameron draws back at this point, getting overwhelmed by all the thoughts coming from the old bear, unable to understand them without more context. Looking forward, he glimpses the various scenarios again, and the one constant is death. Most involve him dying, and a good amount involve Devon dying as well. Cameron imagines that this is indicative of what's most likely to happen. But a few, just two in fact, show Cameron and Devon surviving, with Brian either living or dying. Cameron doesn't care much about the latter, just as long as he can get Devon and himself out of Echo alive. They can deal with Brian afterwards. Cameron doesn't even care much if he doesn't make it, especially in his state of mind, but he won't accept not being able to save Devon. Suddenly remembering what he had done earlier, Cameron tries to subtly brush his pocket and is amazed that the key is still there. Does Brian know? Well, he does know what Cameron had planned, but in his own excitement and especially because he's tweaked out, he's hyper-focusing on other things. He'd also missed the key being taken out of his pocket. That and Brian's memory is terrible. Decades of drugs at neurotoxic doses had dismantled who he used to be. He doesn't even seem to remember why he choked Cameron in the first place. Had to make connections down in Sonora. Stuff was over the fucking counter there, so it was easy to get, but getting it over the fucking border is a whole different issue. Brian suddenly stops talking, eyes narrowing. Cameron's pulse quickens as he wonders if Brian had just remembered his plan. What's wrong? His voice is still rough from the strangling, a deep soreness starting to emanate from the core of his neck. I don't know, I just like you better when you're smiling, but if I'm fucking boring ya, just say so. It takes Cameron a few seconds to understand what Brian is even talking about, then a few more to scan the bear's thoughts. In Brian's mind, his smiling has a lot to do with how interesting the bear's over-explanation of Rohypnol is, so Cameron quickly puts one on his face. Oh, sorry. It really is interesting. I'm just so overwhelmed with the drugs and... Shut up! Cameron shuts up. Brian starts to work his jaw, like he's chewing something, before clenching his fists. Cameron tenses up, preparing himself to be hit again. You're cute, but not that cute, and I'm not that stupid. I hate fags like you, sucking up and sucking dick so that you can get what you really want. Brian's mind flicks through a few faces, but the only one defined enough for Cameron to comprehend is a fox in a red hat. Then Brian seems to relax, but the anger is still there, the bear having honed it to become more cool and collected, which only makes it all the more terrifying. Sure, the stimulants increase empathy in a normal brain, but if Brian abused them to the point that amphetamines feel like caffeine, then it's probably only increasing his irritability and rage. That's what his mother was like at the end, and it always confused Cameron as to why someone would want to do a drug that makes them feel worse. I got a better idea. Cameron gasps as Brian grabs him by the ear. No, stop! I can walk with you! I won't try to Ow! Cameron senses the bear's amusement at his fear of being pulled up by his ear again, and the coyote quickly stifles his begging, realizing that it might shift Brian's interest back to using Cameron for torture rather than his abilities. The pain had been blinding, but it's nothing, absolutely nothing compared to what this bear has done to others. Cameron manages to settle into a stumbling walk as Brian pulls him along, bent over and trying to see the ground in the darkness, all while he tries to carefully follow the bear's rough, unpredictable movements. Every minute or so, Cameron looks forward and sees the scenario he's aiming for, still within reach, so he keeps walking. Meanwhile, a van emerges from the trees, parked a ways off the side of the road. Brian freezes, staring. Then he lets out a surprised laugh. Ha! Well, I'll be damned. The fucker got away. Who? The coyote winces as Brian continues to hold him by the ear. Cameron hopes that he's talking about Devon, even though he can sense the presence of the younger bear just ahead of them. The coyote would be glad to be proven wrong about his abilities, especially if it means Devon gets away. But Cameron knows. That cat! I swear, I shot him twice, too! Then again, he didn't do that weird jerking thing people do when you give him the kill shot, so I must have missed the second time. Thought maybe I just killed him with the first. Cameron looks where Brian is staring and sees the spot where Arturo must have been. Dark stains cover the leaves, along with what looks like vomit, and Cameron feels his own stomach churn at the sight. It's difficult to connect his outgoing, oblivious friend to the mess, and Cameron feels guilt mingle with his misery as he realizes what's happening to Artie is his fault. But he knows Artie is far away now, miles away, and Cameron silently encourages the cat to keep going, to do whatever he can to save them and himself, even though he's clearly in terrible shape. Cameron hopes that Artie can hear him, even if he's awake right now. Cameron senses another ominous shift in the bear's motivation. Brian doesn't think that Artie will make it to the interstate, but he knows that he should go looking for the cat. But everything was so fucked from the start. 3 young men who likely have close family and friend groups, all 3 of them injured, beaten, and all 3 knowing full well what Brian is capable of. What Brian has done. There's no point to it anymore. Brian had almost reverted to thinking that he'd get away with all of this somehow, but no. This is the end. Well, guess that's it then. Figured it was getting close for a while now. The calm with which Brian accepts his nearing demise makes Cameron want to try to escape all over again. Why can't this bear just end it without taking them down with him? It's the end for him, not them. Can I see Devon? Cameron half-heartedly smiles, hoping that it might sway the bear, but he's not paying attention to the coyote. Brian shakes his head at the somber version of himself, the version that actually did plan to let Cameron go, because why would he add to his problems by killing the yote if said yote could take them all away? That's why he tried to be so nice to him, and then of course things got out of hand. Cameron begins to shake as he senses Brian's arousal and excitement. He's thinking about Cameron, about his baggie full of bath salt, and about how long it might take to find them in. Cameron blanches mentally, unsure of what that dark place full of death is, but he knows that he does not want to go there. Where are you taking me? You're the psychic. Figure it out. Keeping his hold on the coyote, Brian pulls Cameron towards the van. It isn't long before Artie realizes that the lights along the interstate are actually a lot farther away than he had thought. He has no idea how long he's been walking, but it feels like at least an hour, and the road is maybe just a little closer. At this point, he's so weak, his movements so uncoordinated, that deep down, he knows his body is about to give up. Every dizzy spell, every wave of anxiety, it terrifies the cat that he might have another seizure, and if he does, he knows he won't be getting back up. Artie, please. Come? Artie looks around hopefully. He'd probably start crying right now if Cameron just showed up, if only because he wouldn't be alone anymore. But then Artie sees a pair of headlights closer than others. It gets closer and closer. Artie notes that the lights are coming right towards him, and he doesn't bother getting off the road, feeling like this must be a light at the end of the tunnel situation. And then the lights slow and Artie hears the sound of an engine. What the fuck are you doing standing there like a fucking idiot on the fucking road? Artie's ears twitch, recognizing the voice from somewhere in his past, in what might as well be another life. It's hard to tell because they're screaming at him. A car door opens and Artie just stands there, lost in the light. I told you guys to fuck off. First that fucking bar is closed because of some fucking cold, and now you're still here to fuck with me? I just want a cunting drink to cunting relax. Arturo furrows his brows, never having heard the curse word used in such a way. A figure starts to materialize in front of Arturo, and finally, he recognizes him. What happened to you? The weasel stares at him, then tilts his head to the side, squinting before reaching out and turning Arturo slightly by the shoulder. Shit, there's no way! He couldn't be that fucking... The weasel trails off, then looks at Artie's face. Who did this? Artie reluctantly opens his mouth, for some reason feeling almost embarrassed about his condition. Bar. The weasel stares at him with an odd look. Bar? Yeah, I was at the bar, it's closed. Bear. Bear? Brian? Arturo nods and regrets it immediately as he almost falls over. Damn, you're really fucked up, aren't you? Arturo stares back at the weasel and notices his expression, like he's trying to decide something. It's not the right reaction to the situation, and Artie suddenly feels like he might be in danger, but he has no idea why. All he remembers is that this old man had floored Devon with 2 swings, so combined with his current state, he can't do a thing. Then the weasel seems to come out of whatever it is that he was thinking about. Well, I'll be damned. This is it then, isn't it? That stupid motherfucker. Alright, get in. We're going to the hospital. Arturo stumbles forward, and once the weasel realizes that he's having trouble moving at all, he helps Arturo inside. As he does, the weasel sucks in a breath, grimacing. Jesus Christ, this is really making me not want to do what I'm gonna have to do after this. But you know, everything's gotta end eventually. Arturo isn't sure what the old weasel is talking about, but if he's taking him to the hospital, then he's at least on the right track. Free and friends. Yeah. I'll call Peyton PD, and once I drop you off, gotta make sure that I can beat him back though. Arturo decides that it's the weasel who's acting strange. But as a strange weasel starts to make a 3-point turn to drive back towards the interstate, Arturo is only grateful. He's done what he can, and now the rest is up to God. He can only pray. So he prays for Devon and Cameron, Maria and himself, because if he survives, he knows the road in front of him is long, fractured, and broken. Devon feels his body bouncing and shaking on a hard metallic surface, occasionally leaning from side to side, feeling like he's laying down in a car taking sharp turns. The bear opens his eyes, groaning. Dev?
Come. Is Cameron driving?
The coyote has his own sedan that he drives, but usually, if they're out together, it's in Devon's Jeep. At first, he thinks maybe he's given the wheel to the coyote so that he himself can get some rest, but they came in the Jeep, and Cameron can't drive standard, right?
Come on, stop assuming things.
Lately, Cameron seems to bristle whenever he does. Lately, as in ever since they got to Echo. Devon? I'm here. How are you doing? Cameron's concerned, gentle voice is clearly masking something strained and desperate underneath.
Cameron? What's it? What's wrong?
I told you, he's all drugged up. But he can barely talk.
Come?
Exactly. I already told you I roofied him. It's like blacking out. Anyway, it's wearing off. He's just tired. Is that blood? Why is he bleeding? Did it to himself. Imagine what a mess we'd have if he wasn't drugged, right? Never trust a bear to stay put when you're chaining him up. Devon, can you hear me? Are you okay?
Yeah. Yes.
Then he's drifting back to sleep again. More sounds of driving on a rough road, gravel grinding under the wheels and hitting the undercarriage. When he comes to again, it's stopped and Devon realizes that the van doors are open. Looks like it did wear off just in time. Can I go to him? Please? Devon sees that one of Cameron's ears is twisted in the older bear's grasp, the coyote's head tilted to the side, wincing as he tries to get a better look at Devon. The younger bear becomes very still, seeing his best friend being held by the worst person that he's ever met. One of his soft, sensitive ears that Devon had played with countless times in the past is now twisted tightly onto itself. In Brian's other paw, he holds a shotgun. On top of it all, Brian looks angrier than usual. In fact, he's looking at Cameron with an expression of utter contempt, all while Cameron isn't paying attention to him, looking intently at Devon instead. Of course, fucking typical. I'm glad I saved this. He suddenly grabs the coyote by the shoulders and turns Cameron around to face him, to face away from Devon. Even so, there's no confusion as to what happens to Cameron next. Brian turns slightly away from Cameron, then spins and sends the back of his fist across the coyote's muzzle. The sound is so loud, Devon is shocked awake, adrenaline compensating for the sedative. At first, Devon refuses to believe what he just saw, that a sound like that could have been made with Cameron's muzzle. The coyote's head snaps to the right before he instantly starts to crumble, but Brian holds him up.
Hey!
Devon yells automatically, shocked by what he just saw. He's never seen someone hit that hard in his entire life. In the silence that follows, the distant sound of something small clattering around the van as if a plastic bead had been thrown against the metal walls. Devon hears it land next to him, and looking down, he sees something long spinning in place before finally coming to a stop. It's thin, white, and starts wide, but tapers to a sharp point. Devon only has a moment to focus on it before he grunts as Cameron lands on top of him, Brian having to push him over. As he's looking down at the coyote and sees the blood beginning to seep from his mouth, Devon realizes the white thing is one of Cameron's teeth, and shocked anger overcomes the fear.
Hey!
All senses has seemingly left Devon, everything he's feeling and thinking condensing down to that one word that he screams to express his rage.
Come!
Panic is making him breathe faster, though he tries to keep his chest from heaving to avoid bouncing Cameron's head. Brian had hit him so hard that it definitely could have killed him. What makes it all the more terrifying is the way Cameron's body went limp. It had been so reminiscent of Artie's sudden collapse when he had suddenly lost his life. But Cameron is breathing, though it's in a terrible, snorting way.
Come here, baby. Can you hear me?
The panic in his voice lowers to an almost pitiful whine as he stares at the coyote twitching, his eyes half open and his head turning back and forth slowly. Whoops, took out a bit much more on him than I meant to. Heh, fuck, that hurt. Brian shakes the paw that he used to hit Cameron, as if bashing Cameron's muzzle made it sting. Devon's rage crescendos once more.
Brian! I will fucking kill you!
Brian looks surprised for just a second, then he goes on grinning, enjoying the reaction, as if he's watching a show. This only makes Devon angrier.
I will knock every tooth out of your fucking head! I will tear your throat out! I'll...
Devon's voice weakens, breaks, then turns off under Brian's apparent glee at the younger bear's fury. Realizing that Cameron's ears are twitching at his shouting, Devon returns his attention to Cameron as the coyote lets out a low, rasping groan.
Cameron Connie, can you hear me right? Cameron?
Meanwhile, blood oozes out of the coyote's nose and mouth, seeping into the fur on Devon's stomach and side. Devon tries to keep his sobbings and gasping to a minimum as Cameron's head continues to rest over his diaphragm. Cameron's eyes flutter, then he blinks, and Devon sees the light of consciousness re-enter his eyes.
Cam!
Devon? Cameron grunts under his breath, lifting his head slightly. Brian already looked bored at the catastrophe that he had created, and now he keeps looking over his shoulder into the darkness that stretches behind him, shifting impatiently. All right, make it quick, Yote. We need to get moving.
Don't you touch him! You could have broken his fucking neck!
Devon's voice cracks and it turns hoarse again. Brian bristles, finally reacting, but Devon turns his attention back to Cameron, continuing to try and gently coax him into a state of consciousness.
Come on, baby. Can you hear me? Can you understand what I'm saying?
Slowly, Cameron lifts his head, a mixture of blood and saliva connecting his lips to Devon's fur in a long strand. I'm okay. I'm fine. Cameron sounds confused as he mumbles, trying to get up unsteadily.
No, stay still.
No, get up. Didn't I tell you what I'd do to your bear if you don't?
Then do it! Come over here and do it, you fucking coward! You fucking scum!
Devon. Cameron's voice is calm, albeit quiet and weak, and the bear goes silent as he focuses back on the coyote. He has his head lifted, trying to focus on Devon's face. Who's feeling this right now? The question catches the bear by surprise.
What?
The mines, that's right. I'm going to the mines and I'm coming back for you. Cameron clasps a paw to his muzzle, wincing hard as he shuts his eyes tight.
What mines? Stay here.
Devon's eyes well up with tears, seeing that the coyote is barely coherent, barely able to understand what's happening. Then Cameron leans in to kiss the bear, again taking Devon by surprise. He immediately smells and tastes Cameron's blood, making the gorg rise in his throat. It reminds him of his predatory nightmares, but Cameron insists, so Devon forces himself not to heave. He doesn't want to feel the gap where Cameron's lower left canine used to be, the unevenness of his already swelling muzzle. As he forces himself to kiss back, he feels something else press against his lips. Something hard and oddly shaped, and Devon opens his muzzle, allowing the blood to flow into his mouth, but with it comes something else, and Devon realizes all at once that it's a key. Devon maneuvers the key into his muzzle as subtly as he can, hearing Brian sigh impatiently behind Cameron. It slides under his tongue, tiny in his comparatively large muzzle. Cameron whispers into Devon's ear. We're gonna go back home together. I promise.
But where are you going? What mines, honey? Please!
Devon can't keep the whining panic out of his voice, sounding like a cub, but managing to keep his words clear with the tiny key under his tongue. Devon just stares at Cameron as he pulls back, tears rolling down his cheeks as his coyote crawls weakly to his feet and steadies himself against the wall of the van. You're fine. He turns his gaze back to the furious, sobbing bear. Sit tight, kid. We'll be back in a while. I promise. Being knocked out, regaining consciousness, stumbling his way through the dark, all while on an untold amount of shrooms is harrowing. That's the only word Cameron feels is appropriate for the situation. Harrowing. The world is more dreamlike than his dreams. This combination of disorientating factors leaves Cameron fumbling through a series of events immediately after he'd reached the old bear. Brian grabbed his palm and suddenly they were moving swiftly through the desert before Cameron is pulled into a place that's cold and dark, lit up dimly by an old electric lantern, its handle hanging from the barrel of Brian's shotgun. If Cameron thought his perception of time was fucked on weed, now it's twisted over on itself. He's exhausted, having not eaten a proper meal in well over a day, and his throat is so dry. He thinks that he might be willing to drink Brian's drugged water. Each time Brian goes over a bend first, or his bulk obscures it, the lantern's light disappears and leaves Cameron in darkness. Each time that happens, brilliant red arcs crowd his vision. Who's in the darkness? I am. I'm in the darkness. Everything is darkness. No, just me. Stop fighting it. It'll only make it worse. Cameron is surprised by the bear's sudden appearance. Where am I? Brian sighs heavily again. Doesn't matter. But... Cameron crumbles up as something jabs him hard in the sternum, twisting in on itself, feeling a black hole open in his chest. It sucks the rest of his body and the attention into it as the canine curls up on the hard dirt floor, whining and grunting. Finally, air returns to his lungs, and as it does, he hears a snorting sound again. After a while, Cameron looks up from his position on the ground to see Brian on his knees, appearing to smell the stock of his shotgun. Then Cameron notices the white powder, and he understands what's happening. Cameron hears a familiar voice, one that he's sure that he's hearing and not imagining. Don't snort it. You're trying to coat your nasal cavity, not your fucking lungs. That's how my friends did it. Then your friends are fucking idiots. Brian looks up from his disappearing line of bath salts. Who are you talking to? Cameron quietly tries to hush Dylan, but Brian already heard them. On top of that, Brian doesn't seem angry or upset, but his continued stare demands an answer. His name's Dylan. He's my ex. Sorry, we don't get along well. You getting some third man syndrome? Whenever I get real fucked up on too many drugs for too long, a person always shows up. I end up having a conversation with them and everything. Brian readjusts the way that he's holding his lantern and gun and grabs Cameron's arm with the other. I heard it happens to people in survival situations too. Anyway, I'm always too delirious to remember who the third man is. Yeah. Cameron can't understand how Dylan isn't real, but this nightmare bear apparently is. Is he being tricked? Alright, here's the deal. I'll stop hitting you as long as you're smiling. Got it? Huh? Brian clenches his fists meaningfully. Cameron winces, then quickly stretches his mouth into a large smile, even though it hurts to the point that tears well up in his eyes. Oh, sorry. I didn't realize what you were talking about for a second. I remember now. Sure you do. Pathetic faggot. Brian continues to inspect Cameron as the coyote remains quiet, keeping a smile plastered on his face. This experience is too much. All of this is too much. He just wants it to stop, and will do whatever this bear, this source of his torment, wants if it prevents him from being hurt again. Guess I did bust your chops pretty good, huh? Cameron flinches as the bear grabs his badly aching muzzle in one giant paw. Wait, please don't. Ugh. Cameron cringes hard, but tries his best to hold still. Yep, broke your tooth too, swelling up a bit, but you're cuter with your face all messed up like that. Too bad it's gonna look real ugly by tomorrow morning. Not that it'll matter. It's just hard to look at you now, with that stupid scar. Brian lets go and grabs his shoulder instead, at the same time glancing at Cameron's shirt. You from Bridgetown? Timber City? Or did you just pick that up at Goodwill? I always say when you're shopping at Goodwill, never pick up clothes that have anything to do with the place. Fuck, just a few years back I took a Weston sweatshirt from the Salvation Army and... Cameron follows along silently. Meanwhile, that third presence has shifted into something else. Something a bit more familiar. Brian's getting chatty again from the second dose he took. Anyway, I hear that city's overwhelmed with Antifa and all that. A true liberal hellscape if there ever was one. His mother, following behind them, is holding his paw. Looking back, he can't see her clearly, but he knows it's her. It's okay. A lot of the time, it's outside groups coming into the city making trouble. He even sounds like her, defending the city they both grew up in, despite its problems, despite its streets becoming a stage for the country's culture wars to physically play out. even while they suffered on the outskirts of what was supposed to be a liberal bastion lit up by the lights of tolerance and welfare, but instead glowing orange from burning cars and flashbangs. And yet, they defended it because they both believed in its core principles. Now, though, Cameron looks behind himself while also looking back. He's taller than she is, and he's reminded of just how small she was, how small she'd seem to him now if she'd survive. He would have saved her too, if she could have held on just a little longer. But how much longer? 4, 5 years? Could she have held on that long? No, not with her habit and the amount that she was using. And though Cameron doesn't want to admit it, it was her death that spurred him to make the first serious change in his life. His mom wasn't a good mom. All things considered, she shouldn't have ever had children. But how can he judge? She was just 17 years old, excited and in love, living out of a 70s Chevy van, but all of that came to an end when he was born in December 1995. Then his abusive, probably schizophrenic father left and committed suicide somewhere in the mid-2000s. But for a few months in 1995, his parents truly wanted to make a good life for him, and that feeling from that moment in time overwhelms Cameron. They wanted him to be happy, successful, and they truly thought that he'd be the one to break the curse of poverty on both of their families. And even though that they wanted that for him, they especially wanted him to be happy, to have a family life and a childhood that both his parents were only able to see other kids enjoy from afar. They tried. But it's the most typical love story for people like them. Because then, like in all other stories, things break, and then things settle. He'd done the exact same thing before Devon. She should have taken more precautions. She left him alone in the trailer often, her medications and recreational drugs freely available for him to experiment with while she was at work. He became an addict just like her, and he had come to understand the baggage that comes with that label, that it's not just about craving or a desire for something. Everyone has that. No, it's about who you are as a person. A liar, a thief, a cheater. Someone willing to do anything to get whatever it is that their addictions demand, anything to feel good. Whether it's pathetically checking all the coin dispensers in a casino once you've spent your life savings, or pathetically combing through the carpet for whatever drug it is that you're starting to come down from. The only thing that saved him from that life and death was his grades. Somehow, through all the substance abuse and neglect, he was a straight A student, and that's what got him a partial scholarship to the University of Pueblo. And that's what got him out of the trailer parks surrounding Bridgetown and into this state's flagship university. A few schools in his own state had better offers, but Pueblo was the more prestigious of the schools he got accepted into. A top 100 school with the best ranked nursing and engineering programs in the region. That, and at the time, Cameron wanted to be far away from Bridgetown, even if that meant the desert. And then he met Devon. She wasn't a good mom, but she was a great person, a wonderful person, and she did the best that she could with what she had at the time. She brought him into a chaotic, unstable life, a life that she saved multiple times, and while he occasionally wished his mother would have just let him die, now, Cameron is only thankful. While most of his life was tough, the past 5 years have been better than he would have ever dared to dream was possible. His life was perfect up until yesterday, when they got here. Tears run down his face, conflicted about how he should feel, but just knowing that he misses her, that he loves her, and that he hopes that she is okay wherever she is. This third person squeezes his paw reassuringly. Cameron squeezes back, and he's comforted by the feeling that for this moment, he's sealed off from Brian and the town, and it's just him and his mom walking through these mines. She tells him that she's proud of him for graduating high school and college, and she's happy he found Devon. Would she really be proud of him if she knew what he studied? If she was still around? I would have majored in business administration or something. What did you major in? Smile. A gentle voice from behind him, barely audible, and carried on the soft breeze that grows weaker the deeper that they go into these tunnels. Music theory. And what the hell are you supposed to do with that? Teach? The automatic answer, the one that he had prepared for all of his skeptical friends who were going into STEM-related fields. You a teacher? No, but that was the plan. Some plan? I mean, I didn't go into any depth, so I had financial freedom after I graduated. You know, you're pretty coherent for someone that's on that many shrooms. Most people would lose their minds. Oh, I am. I definitely am. I don't know. I have more control than I did the first time that I tried it. In fact, Cameron feels like he's losing his mind right now, laughing even though it makes every part of his body ache. Xanax is like magic when you're panicking. Anyway, what is it that you do for a living? Did you pay it all off? Judging by the tone in Brian's voice, he already knows the answer to that. Customer support for Julian. Sad. Working for a country that we nuked twice. Back in the 80s, we used to beat people up for working for companies like that. Cameron is at a loss for words, but only for a moment. Okay. Julian, the current market leader in smartphone manufacturing, is Taiwanese, and the coyote assumes that the bear is thinking of a certain other country in the same region. Either way, it's a strange and disturbing aside. But that's just Brian, and sometimes with Brian, it's best for Cameron to just keep his mouth shut and to also keep on smiling. So, why music? You sing? Cameron wishes the bear would stop asking him questions, making small talk like any of this is a routine part of their lives. But the coyote assumes bath salts will make anyone talkative. Kinda? What do you mean, kinda? Either you sing or you don't. Well, yeah, I mean, I sing, but I'm not very good. I mean, you fucking better be if you spent 4 years learning. How about you sing, and I'll decide? It's getting harder to keep up with the cheerful charade as Cameron senses the cruel, malicious arousal rising inside of Brian again. The second dose is making him do more than just talk too much. Sure. Just gotta think of one to sing. Anything you want to hear? I know a lot of 90s grunge and alternative rock. Heh, you're a walking, talking stereotype, aren't you? You write your own music? I definitely tried. A subtle twitch of annoyance ripples through the air. You know, one thing that really pisses me off is when someone's acting like an overly humble little bitch. Either you do, or you don't. Either you're good at it or you're not. Either you offer something different, or you fucking don't. So which the fuck is it? I do. I can. Just give me a second. The corners of Cameron's muzzle turned down slightly, his composure almost crumbling. He's doing the best that he can under the current circumstances, but he needs help. Devon, where are you? Brian's attitude shifts from one of extreme to the next, making Cameron feel a sort of emotional whiplash, but as long as it keeps him from getting hit, or more importantly, killed, then he's fine with that. Tentatively, Cameron starts to sing, choosing the song that got him the most attention. The one that was played in moderate rotation at Mountain West colleges, along with a few in the Northwest. A song about his ex, Dylan, about their mutual love and hate for each other, about the abuse that they used to hurl at each other, physical and mental, and finally, about their breakup. His voice is rough and cracked, and while some of it is because he isn't warmed up, it's mostly due to having his throat crushed. Dehydration and screaming doesn't help either. But aside from jolting each time Brian pulls him in a different direction, Cameron finds the melody and rhythm. As he does, he becomes a bit more bold, singing louder until his voice carries through the tunnels. It feels very strange with his swelling muzzle and missing tooth. Brian still says nothing, and Cameron realizes that he's listening intently. While this makes the coyote nervous, he knows it's better than the bear being angry, and mainly, he just needs to keep singing. Devon is in the mines with them, and he needs directions. Cameron just wishes that it doesn't feel like he's leading Devon to his own demise. Finding the entrance wasn't hard. While the main entrance had been blocked off with rebar before being filled and sealed with concrete, he'd known about the side entrance from the supernatural forms he researched before coming here. That and Cameron's blood was sprinkled here and there, and the scent of it spurred Devon on. Of course, it led right to that entrance. He had started unlocking his cuffs the second that he thought Brian might be out of earshot. He had fumbled with a tiny slippery key before freeing his wrists, revealing blood-crusted fur matted under the broken skin. Now Devon moves through the mines in complete darkness. It's almost suffocating, almost panic-inducing, but the scent of Cameron mixing with the foul odor of Brian pushes the younger bear deeper into the tunnels. The air feels tense, as if the mine itself is intent on seeing what happens next. He's not going to fall into another abyss. When Lupita died, it had been an accident, one that happened after a tornado shredded their town, leveling the block across the street, but leaving their house mostly intact. As a 12-year-old, he just didn't think that it could happen. They had survived the actual disaster, but just as the relief started to set in and his guard started to come down, it happened. He felt powerless in that situation, and he knew that her death had happened because of him. But this time it's different. He couldn't fight what took Lupita, but he can fight what's taking Cameron.
Damn it.
After about 10 minutes, though, Devon starts to become more agitated, unable to hear them any longer, and going by the scent alone, Devon can tell that he's lost the trail.
Shit!
He hisses through his teeth, trying to keep quiet in case Brian is somehow nearby, lying in wait. And then somehow he hears Cameron's singing voice. Devon goes completely still. He'd recognize his boyfriend's voice anywhere, of course, but Cameron's style is different, having the qualities of a singer from the 50s while retaining a grunge-like roughness. The coyote was heavily influenced by the black and white musicals his mother used to watch late at night. He was embarrassed about it after being critiqued in one of his vocal performance classes, and he had been trying to change his technique when Devon first met him. But Devon always liked Cameron's voice, and it was due to Devon's urging that Cameron leaned into his style. Devon begins moving as fast as he can while staying quiet. He knocks his nose into a few walls and scrapes up his elbows and shoulders, but he keeps moving, simply trying to force his way in the direction of the voice. Then, just as he thinks that he's a few turns away, it stops. Then Cameron screams and Devon drops all attempts at stealth.
Come! Brian!
He calls out to let Brian know he's there, at least distract him from the coyote. Then he barrels his way through the darkness, trying to find what he's sure is the last turn. Why Brian has brought Cameron here, he doesn't know. He doesn't even know what he's going to do when he meets them. Well, anything. He'll do anything. Brian is looking a bit more distracted, starting to scan the tunnel walls before his eyes settle on what looks like a large crack from the ceiling to the ground. Cameron turns up his singing a notch, knowing that this is their destination, the end of the road. The old bear glances at him, looking annoyed. This, for whatever reason, is what brings Brian out of his stimulant-induced hyperfocus. Brian finally realizes what's happening. It's only now that the old bear remembers Cameron's plan to take the key. Even Cameron forgot. But now, a huge paw flies to his pocket, digging inside and realizing that it's too late before he whirls on Cameron. "Oh, you little faggot!" Cameron turns and runs, trying to take advantage of Brian letting him go for those couple of seconds. Something pounds onto Cameron's lower back, just to the right, and it feels like a cannonball being smashed through his body. Cameron is launched forward against the tunnel wall directly in front of him, and he tries to hold onto it, sliding down slightly as he stares straight up into the darkness. It's so dark that Cameron can't tell if the ceiling is a few feet above him, or if it's simply endless space full of glowing arches that stretch on forever. His eyes stay wide, his breath leaking out of his muzzle in a slow, high-pitched rasp, not wanting to believe the pain he feels spreading through his insides is real. Then he's on the ground, writhing and groaning uncontrollably while electric pain spider webs through his body. The blows Brian had delivered before are nothing compared to this. Cameron thrashes around in the dirt, desperate to find a way out of the hell. He's in hell. Who's in hell? He has to be. What are these red arches, and why are flames spreading from his guts into his lungs? Damn, you'll probably only piss blood after that. Brian's mock concerned voice snaps Cameron back to his situation that he's in, and in the very back of his head, he realizes his trip is beginning its descent. The pain is still present though, and it's not letting up. How can he feel pain if he's nothing? He's finally breathing again, but each exhale is accompanied by a whining wheeze, involuntary tears rolling down his face. Brian leans over him and the coyote cringes. No, stop, please! Brian pauses, then just grabs Cameron by the arm and yanks him up. Cameron lets out a hoarse, breathless scream as his aching body is forced to move again. It echoes around them before cutting off as a huge arm tightens around Cameron's throat.
Come, Brian!
Devon's voice is very close, maybe only a tunnel or two away. Brian mumbles quietly next to Cameron's ear. Shut the fuck up right now, or I will obliterate your other kidney. Got it? Cameron feels the threat hovering over the left side of his back this time, and he quickly shuts his muzzle, even though groans still force their way up, muffled behind his lips. This seems to at least satisfy Brian, and he drops the chokehold before shoving Cameron forward. At first, Cameron is surprised that the bear didn't just hit him again anyway, but Brian's distracted again. Devon's too close, and a few terrible plans go through the older bear's head that cause Cameron's already aching abdomen to lurch with nausea and fear. Brian considers waiting and ambushing Dev, but he quickly discards the idea as he realizes Cameron might try to warn Devon by making noises right as he reaches them. That's exactly what Cameron would do, even if it means being beaten to death by Brian. Deciding again that nothing matters anymore, he pushes Cameron forward through the narrow opening, the passage becoming more tight until Brian has to turn sideways and struggle through, and then it opens up. Cameron smells death. He instinctively backs up right into Brian. No, please don't do this. I can't. He can't finish his sentence. Brian's victims felt pain that still seems unimaginable to the coyote. Knowing Devon is close behind them, Cameron makes one last effort to turn and dodge around Brian, but the bear is far too large and he easily grabs up the coyote and throws him further into the hollow. Cameron comes up immediately, trying to suppress his whines and whimpers. Brian, just wait a second. Think about it. I can help you. Why did you bring me here in the first place? Brian gives Cameron a dispassionate look, but he does pause, and that gives Cameron some hope. And some time. Let me talk to them. Let me see if I can reason with them. We both know that all of this is over. Cameron senses a slight shift in Brian's intentions as the bear begins to seriously consider Cameron's reasonings. I know that you need my help. I can feel them. They want you, Brian, and they're waiting for you. I know what it's like, walking in circles for most of your life, making the same stupid mistakes and knowing what you need to do to get better, and just never doing it. Oh yeah? But I finally did, and my life was almost perfect. Until I met you. So, let's do it. Let's end this nightmare right now. Brian takes a deep breath and holds it. The entire mine, the entire town seems to hold its breath with him, and Cameron starts to understand how deeply entwined this bear is with this place, this entity that seems to be pulling all the strings. Cameron can feel the monolithic entity shift and turn, as if it too senses an inevitable end. Brian is close to taking the coyote's offer. But it isn't meant to be, and Cameron, of course, knows that. A scuffling from the entrance announces Devon's arrival. Guess he's finally here, huh? Glad I brought my 10 gauge. Always wanna make sure that you got a good firepower when bears are involved, eh? Cameron watches in horror as the old bear opens up the shotgun before inserting a shell. Cameron's mind is blank as he automatically lunges at the huge bear, grabbing at the shotgun barrel as Brian snarls in rage. Everything's falling apart. You're spiraling. Devon shoves his bulk through the narrow passage, squeezing through to the hollow on the other side. When he stumbles into the open space, Devon spots Cameron immediately, the coyote being swung left and right as he fights with Brian over the shotgun. Cameron is covered in blood, tears matting the fur on his cheeks. The situation is already a terrible one, but again his fear for Cameron turns to anger at Brian as he sees the bear throwing vicious, crushing kicks at Cameron's lower body. Devon realizes this is it, and he has no time to think. Devon charges up behind the old bear, and he bites deeply into the side of Brian's neck. Apparently biting someone other than himself is a lot more effective, and he feels his canines sink deeper into the flesh beneath the thick fur. The old man is covered in a layer of protective padding, just like himself, but the older bear clearly has a lot more of it. Still, Brian screams, high-pitched and full of fury. Then Cameron is finally shaken loose from the shotgun, and Brian grabs the barrel with both paws before ramming the butt of the shotgun back into Devon's stomach. The younger bear retches and crumbles over, but he manages to grab the shotgun, holding onto the stock tightly. Brian, clearly aware of how bad the situation could become for himself, lets go of the shotgun so that he can turn around and throw a knee into Devon's hunched form, an inch above the navel, almost the exact spot that he hit earlier. Devon feels as if his guts are flattened to his spine before liquefying, the force actually lifting him off the ground for a half second. Even though he lands on his feet, he immediately sinks to his knees, muzzle wide open as he continues to battle with his own lungs, all the while still trying to hold onto the shotgun. "You're a dead man walking, boy. Well, on your knees anyway. What a surprise." Brian fumbles shakily to find the stock of the shotgun, hidden somewhere under Devon's bulk, while simultaneously trying to avoid the end of the barrel in case Devon is able to find the trigger. The attack had been enough to rattle Brian, even if it was short-lived. Devon curses himself trying to move, knowing he probably can't win, but he needs to do something, maybe hurt Brian so bad that Cameron can at least get away. Get up! But he can't breathe, so there's not much he can do to defend himself, let alone stand up. So Devon keeps his hold on the shotgun even as Brian starts trying to yank it from the weakened grasp, and he's starting to succeed.
Come. Run.
Devon rasps, not even sure where Cameron is right now, assuming he still might be on the ground after being kicked so many times. Brian squeals. Looking up from his doubled-up position, Devon sees Brian in front of him, bent over as well, the grizzled bear grabbing between his legs. As Brian sinks lower, Cameron appears, lowering a foot. The coyote smiles with relief and joy at seeing Devon, and seeing that he's got the shotgun. Cameron seems so sure that they've won that he doesn't see Brian's quick recovery, the old bear forcing himself up, murderous vengeance in his eyes as he runs at Cameron with an animalistic scream. Devon can only watch as the huge bear charges at Cameron. No! The much smaller coyote can only yelp in panic before Brian smashes into him and crushes him against the wall. Devon hears a crunching sound just as he gets his first tiny slip of air, just as he hears Cameron's own air wheeze out in a yowl-like moan. And then, even more viciously than Devon had attacked Brian, the old bear begins to maul Cameron. Brian bashes him left and right with blows aimed at the coyote's face before Cameron collapses. There, Brian begins to rip and tear into the coyote with his claws. Devon begins to move, but it's slow, and he just wishes his lungs would start working. He struggles with the shotgun, but it suddenly opens up, and Devon doesn't know anything about working guns. So he leaves it behind, just knowing that he needs to stop Brian. Cameron tries to crawl away from Brian, and Devon sees the horror mirrored in his boyfriend's eyes. Then Brian comes down on him again, and Cameron throws his left elbow back at the bear's face, only for Brian to sink his teeth into Cameron's forearm and elbow. Then he twists and tears, and Cameron lets out a howling sound, his body twisting violently. He's on his back now, and he goes quiet, staring in shock at the wall that he's laying perpendicular to, his eyes beginning to roll up as Brian thrashes his head and a crunch comes from Cameron's arm. The coyote cannot make any sounds now, the breath seemingly knocked out of him by the pain. Devon has never heard Cameron make those feral pain sounds, not like this. And to see him in so much agony that he can't breathe, can't even vocalize it anymore, it gives Devon the final push he needs. He charges into Brian, and the force knocks the old bear off the coyote. Devon has never seriously mauled someone in his entire life, but it's something that comes naturally to him and Brian, and while he has played maul people in the past, including Cameron, this is the first time that he brings his claws, teeth, and muscles to full use. Straddling the old bear, Devon roars at Brian before lunging down. First he bites Brian's neck again, but from the front this time, while his paws rip and tear into the bigger bear's hide. Brian seems to concentrate for a second before burying his fists into Devon's stomach, but the younger bear is tensed up this time, and the fist gets no further than his stomach muscles. Still, Brian's power is almost supernatural, and Devon lurches and grunts, folding over, an ache forming deep in the pit of his belly, but it only makes him bite harder. Devon can feel that he's truly stunned the old bear, at least for now, and as Brian takes his fists back, he resorts to panic shoves instead of actually trying to fight. While Brian finally does try to claw at Devon's face and eyes, the younger bear leans back and smashes his head into Brian's muzzle. The sound it makes indicates a broken snout, and Brian lets out another high-pitched whine before screaming and trying to lunge up to bite Devon's neck. Devon leans back, just avoiding the teeth before smashing his head a second time into Brian's face. Then as Brian lays dazed, Devon lays into his snout 3 times, full force, trying to pound every bit of agony into Brian that the old bear had given all of them. That would be impossible, though. Still, Devon feels a savage satisfaction as he sees at least 2 of the old bear's yellow teeth roll out of his muzzle. Brian howls and rolls violently, finally dislodging the slightly smaller bear. Devon heaves for breath, watching as Brian comes up several feet away, crouching and also heaving for breath. You! Brian can barely form words, but not just because he's out of breath. His bitter hatred is evident, so mad that only frothy spit flies from his lips as he sputters. But then Brian's eyes flick to the right, and Devon remembers all at once that he'd left the gun there, having been focused on helping Cameron. The old bear moves lightning fast once again, and he shoots off to the right, and Devon realizes Cameron is there too.
Cameron, look out!
Cameron, laying in agony after Brian's vicious attack, knows something is deeply wrong with his body. The crushing against the wall of the chamber had done it. The true pain, though, emanates from his left arm, and Cameron knows that it's mangled, broken, and useless. But he can still use his legs, and Cameron forces himself to get up and starts moving for the shotgun, hearing the snarls and growls of the bears behind him. He does his best to stay quiet, but stifled grunts and small squeaks force their way out of his throat. As soon as he touches the shotgun, though, he hears Devon's shout.
Cameron, look!
And again, the nightmare that is Brian is tearing at his body, pinning him to the wall, and Cameron screams in terror as the huge bear starts trying to bite his neck. The panicked coyote is only able to get his unbroken arm up. It's maybe only 3 seconds before Devon is there, but it feels like an eternity, Cameron considering how badly it might feel to die from having his throat ripped out. Cameron's right arm is torn up as well, but since Brian is just gnawing and isn't shaking his head this time, his bones at least remain intact. Then Devon wrenches the big bear off of him. Cameron tries to get up, to crawl, but it's useless, his body too beaten and broken to do anything other than dragging himself away. Then he hears Brian's high-pitched squealing again, and this time it's genuinely terrified. Cameron looks over and sees the old bear is now on his back, with his arm in a sort of hold by Devon. Devon is laying on his back, Brian's arm pulled towards his chest, Devon's hips close to the older bear's shoulder as his legs lock together at the ankles. Devon grunts and heaves with all his might, his huge powerful body arching towards the ceiling. Devon is intent on really hurting Brian this time, wanting to make sure that he pays the old man back for Cameron's tooth and arm. So with the tooth part avenged, Devon focuses on destroying the other bear's arm. Bear bones are especially hard to break. Devon has never had a broken bone in his life, but the younger bear knows a thing or two about applying force. His dad watched MMA all the time, and while he knows little about fighting, he knows why arm bars can be so devastating. But even as he leans back, bending the big bear's arm over his inner thigh, only a few cracks are heard, but it's nothing serious. Devon needs the arm to have less resistance and more distance from the fulcrum. Unlocking his legs, he takes just a second to slam his foot right into the old bear's jaw. For just a second, Brian goes limp, and Devon relocks his ankles before lifting the limp arm away from his chest and curling up. Then he heaves back on the arm again, arching hard while he twists his body.
Torque! Now you're thinking like an engineer.
As the catchphrase of one of Devon's old professors comes to his mind, a crack splits the air and Brian's screams somehow reach a new panicked pitch. Devon looks over to see Cameron has dragged himself a few feet away, leaving a dark, horrible blood trail smeared behind him. Devon stumbles over to him, hovering his paws over the coyote's neck.
Baby, your neck. Let me see it.
He didn't get me. Let's go. Cameron is in no shape to run, so he groans as Devon lifts him into his arms, the bear starting to stumble towards the exit. Devon looks down at the coyote in his arms, just now seeing how truly terrible Cameron's injuries are.
Need to get you out of here. Shit, where?
In the frantic chaos of fighting off Brian, and in making sure that his boyfriend wasn't bleeding out, Devon had forgotten something. The butt of the shotgun, powered by the old bear's huge body, reminds him of a harsh, sickening ache that spreads in a wave through his body. Cameron hears the dull thud followed by the vibrations through Devon's thick body. He feels the bear cringe as he sinks to his knees, huddled over Cameron. The huge bear lifts up the shotgun he managed to keep a hold of. He struggles to hold it up with only his left paw, as his injured right arm dangles before he practically swings it up to prop his right elbow against the wall, a few pops coming from his shoulder as he does. He screams again when that happens, but with his fully functional wrist, he can now take steady aim, and with how narrow the hollow is, there's nowhere to go. Don't you fucking move! You got that? This is over, and I'm killing the Yoda in front of you, and then I'm ripping your fucking arm off, boy! Brian's expression is an odd mixture of excitement and disgust. Pity you ain't half as cute as that pup. Devon can only wheeze in response, and Cameron holds onto him tightly as he's cradled in his arms. God, you fucking ruined it! He was perfectly fine till you showed up. Now he's fucking fucked up to the point that he's not even fuckable. Cameron's ability to see and feel things is fading, just as the effects of the shrooms are fading. Still, there's just a little bit left, and Cameron tries his best to use it. Devon's body begins trembling, and Cameron holds on to him more tightly. Devon's voice, still breathless, whispers into Cameron's ear.
Tony, whatever happens, just play dead, okay? No matter what.
But Cameron suddenly turns. Devon watches as Cameron's face becomes a bouquet of red ribbons, and the bear stumbles as the shot hits his arm as well. Cameron's body jerks violently in his arms before going incredibly still. Devon quickly looks down to see Cameron's no longer with a face. Everything that used to make up his face is splattered against the walls, and it still pours from. Cameron is gone. In shock, Devon looks at his arm and sees the white of bone shards, at first thinking it's his own, but then he sees a few of Cameron's sharp teeth also embedded into his arm. Devon leans over Cameron's body, an expression of untold anguish on his face, as he starts to let out a low, terrible groan that rises in pitch to a bearish howl. After looking forward, Cameron does the only thing that he can think of.
No!
Cameron grabs the barrel and shoves up. The sound is so loud that it instantly deafens Cameron, and though the ringing starts to subside, the hearing in his right ear doesn't come back.
Cameron! Cameron!
I'm fine. I'm fine. Cameron looks to where Brian is. The kickback from the 10 gauge had hit him hard, squarely in the chest. Cameron can almost visualize the shock sent through the old, worn-out heart, already exhausted from the stimulant and the fight. The old bear, still on unsteady feet, stumbles back a bit more before hitting the wall and sliding down to sit. Brian sits propped up against it, looking confused. He clutches his chest, rubbing it and grimacing. The shotgun is on the ground, out of Brian's reach, and the old bear makes no move to get it. Fuck! He starts to try and get back up, but falls back down. Oh, fuck! Oh, fuck! Brian clutches at his chest and stomach and groans. Oh no! That was it? Is this it? What the fuck? What the fuck? What the... Brian slumps back, his body convulsing, then he thrashes about as if trying to escape something. He knocks over and smashes the electric lantern, crushing it under his weight. For several more seconds, they both listen to Brian's groaning, rasping, and snorting before it's silent. It's quiet for a while longer, Cameron and Devon not daring to move. Brian had seemed invincible for so long. Cameron can't get himself to believe that it might be over. Devon whispers into Cameron's ear.
Cameron, how do you feel?
Cameron gives Devon a look that's a mix of love and exasperation, even if Devon can't see it right now. They both know that he's badly fucked up. I think something ruptured. It all feels wrong. Cameron places his right paw on his own torso, wincing.
Don't move, okay? I will get us out of here. I will get us out in no time.
Devon starts to tentatively make his way forward, and just as Cameron is realizing how long this might actually take, possibly too long if there is internal bleeding, his vision flickers. Cameron stares at it, then looks at Devon, wincing at the bear's bloodied and bruised face. But Devon doesn't react to the light, like Cameron is the only one seeing it. But a shroom trip can't emit light no matter how hard you're tripping. I think I can see where to go. Just walk straight.
How?
Cameron starts to shake his head, then stops as his neck sends a pang of fiery pain down his back. I don't know, but I can see. Let's just get out of here, please. Cameron tries hard not to look at Brian's crumbled form against the side wall of the hollow, his wide-open eyes glinting from the gentle glow.
Okay, just tell me where, okay?
And sure enough, as they leave, arch after arch appears and Cameron is confident that they'll lead to the exit. These arches had tortured his mother, but this feels like his mother somehow. As they move, they both hear rustling sounds from far behind them in the mines, but Brian is definitely dead, or at least had been when they left. So they keep moving, trying to keep quiet. Then, within an hour, real light.
Daylight.
Devon looks down at Cameron and winces just as Cameron did when he saw Devon's face.
God, honey, we're gonna get you help, and you're gonna get better, okay?
But what about you? Do you feel okay? Cameron's voice is weaker than it was earlier, and Cameron feels Devon quicken his pace.
I'm fine.
Devon says it sternly, setting his jaw, and Cameron stays quiet.
Cameron, I'm sorry.
And that's the last time you're saying that, okay? I don't blame you for anything. I'm just so glad I met you. He listens to the bear's heartbeat, steady for most of the journey, but getting faster as they get closer to the exit.
I think I hear an helicopter and maybe a megaphone. Shit. Did people come for us?
The shotgun blew out my hearing, so I'm not really sure. His trip is mostly over, yet these visions are so vivid. Cameron stares at this new arch, and something about it feels different. Oh, Mom, I found it.
Huh?
Her arch.
You're seeing arches?
You know how something can happen that's so impactful? It splits your life in two? Like you see life as before and after that moment. It can be good or bad. Devon hesitates, like he wants an answer to a question that he just asked, but he lets it go for now.
Of course.
I think meeting you is the good divide in my life. I think what happened here and what's going to happen after, I think it's the bad divide. It had always been his mother's death, and it still is. A divide. But this time, Cameron realizes that he's been deeply affected mentally, and it's not something that he can just recover from. Something's truly wrong with him. That's been the case for a long time, but now, after this, something's been pushed over the edge. So another divide.
I think we're gonna be okay, Cameron.
Devon, whatever happens after this, I love you, and I'm so happy I met you.
Come on. You didn't have to say that first part. We made it, okay? It's just a fork in the road.
Cameron gasps. Oh, Devon, Artie is alive. He went to get us help, I think. I hope.
What? Oh.
I don't know. He got shot, but he got away. Brian was pissed. He's hurt, but I think he made it.
Oh, that's...
Devon's lips tremble and his face twists up slightly as he tries not to cry, but it's out of incredible relief and happiness. Cameron doesn't tell him how bits of Artie are missing, or that he can't sense him anymore, both because of his waning powers and because Artie is too far away, or at least that's what he hopes. Cameron stares up at the arch, looking both beautiful and terrible at the same time. Raincoat Monster stands to the side as they pass, and this time Cameron does think that it's his whole hallucination. Cardboard and unmoving, just like he's always been. But something about all of this, the way he's seeing things, something has changed. It's not his psychic abilities, because now it's subtle and hardly noticeable again. No, something else happened, and his mind feels wrong. Looking forward is no longer clear, but as Cameron uses the last of his psilocybin in his system to peer into the future, he becomes afraid by what he sees. So he just turns his muzzle slightly to Devon.
Cameron, we are going to make it.
Based on what he saw, Cameron isn't sure. Devon will stay. He was able to see that much. But should he? More than anything, they both want to stay together. But if Cameron becomes a burden to Devon, he doesn't know how he can stay. He just hopes that Devon can still love him after this terrible change, and he hopes that he can fight it, whatever it is. So Cameron leans his head against Devon's shoulder, smiling in a mostly happy but slightly sad way. All right.
Now let's get the hell out of here.
To be
To be
continued.
continued.
Well, fuck. This is the most frustrating to be continued that I've ever had to read. So, Brian is dead. Already, hopefully, got medical attention when Duke took him to the hospital. I'm assuming Duke did something before the police got there because I'm assuming that he was also involved with drugs and stuff like that. So he had to get there before. But I'm hoping that it's at least the police coming to rescue Devon and Cameron. My assumption is what Cameron saw is what he's going to have to go through, which is rehabilitation and like all of that. Because like he said that he mentally he's different. Like sure his mother died and he went through a whole lot of abuse and stuff like that before he found Devon, and the experience in Echo though changed him. And not only that, but the experience with Brian himself and what he was capable of and what he was thinking, what he was going to do to Cameron and Devon, like all of that. So his mind and his body are broken. And my assumption is that he probably can't see why Devon would want to stay with him during all of that, during like have to deal with that. Mm, I can only hope that he is wrong in his assumptions. But yeah. So one more video, one more update. Hopefully that arrives next month. Which will suck because actually hopefully it arrives soon because it's been almost 2 months since I saw this, and again I'm still getting teary-eyed. But yeah, it's been 2 months, so hopefully Hallie had enough time to, pen out the ending because I want to know what happens. I will not be satisfied until I know what happens. So yeah. I remember when it came out for Patreon, me and Orion were talking and like it's like, oh my god. And then specifically the scene with Cameron and the, I guess you could call it a hallucination of his mother. It's like, oh god, that scene. Anytime mothers are involved, I guess. It always gets me. Or parents, I guess, but still. Hmm. So, well, write down what you thought. If you've been staying up to date with Arches, uh, are you satisfied with how Brian died? And are you satisfied with how the ending is shaping up? Um, yeah, write it down, I guess, and we'll discuss it, I guess. And thank you all for watching / listening. If you would like to play Arches, you can find it over on Itch. And you can find a direct link to it from the Echo Project Twitter page, which will be linked down in the description, along with the Patreon in case you want to support all of the Echo Project stories, which are currently ongoing, such as Intera, Glory Hounds, Play Your Role, I think that's what it's called, and any other little thing that they might come up with. And sometimes you do get works in progress and background stuff, especially for like Intera, right before a release is due out, like maybe a few weeks, you do get to see some backgrounds, and sometimes we get to see some of the new characters which are going to be coming out. So yeah, there's that. But yeah, so I guess that's it for now, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.